They have tried everything: bombs, sanctions, cyber attacks, propaganda, economic isolation, diplomatic pressure. For over 4 decades, the most powerful nations on earth have aimed their full arsenal at one country, and yet Iran still stands. Not only stands, but speaks, moves, and shapes the destiny of a region that refuses to be tamed. The question is not whether the West has the strength to bring Iran to its knees, but why Iran never bends. What is it about this nation that makes it so resistant to submission? Is it the missiles, the proxies, the hidden deals, or is it something much deeper, something that can't be measured in headlines or military budgets? Perhaps the real answer lies not in Iran's power, but in its soul. Today, I invite you to take a step back from the noise, from the headlines, from the talking points written in boardrooms, far from the people who feel the weight of their consequences. Let us ask a question few dare to explore honestly. Why is Iran the one country the West can't defeat? Not just with armies, but with ideas. Not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of its people. The answer might surprise you, might even change you. Iran's resilient national identity is one of the most critical reasons why it has remained unconquerable by external forces, especially from the West. This identity is not a recent political construct, but the result of thousands of years of cultural, historical, and civilizational development. Iran, known in ancient times as Persia, was home to one of the world's earliest and most enduring empires, the Achaemenid Empire, which introduced governance systems, legal traditions, and diplomatic norms that influence much of the known world. This legacy has become deeply embedded in the consciousness of the Iranian people, giving them a unique sense of purpose and continuity that transcends temporary political regimes. Over the centuries, despite invasions, occupations, and foreign meddling, Iran has preserved its language, culture, and religious traditions with remarkable tenacity. Unlike many other nations that were colonized and fragmented by imperial powers, Iran remained largely intact, resisting both Ottoman control to the west and Russian or British dominance in the north and south. Even during times when external pressures were at their height, such as in the 19th and early 20th centuries, Iranians retained a strong sense of who they were and what their civilization represented. This sense of national identity has also proven remarkably adaptable. It was strong enough to endure the Arab conquest in the 7th century, but flexible enough to absorb Islam in a way that still preserved Persian language and many pre-Islamic customs. It was resilient during the Mongol invasions, surviving waves of destruction and rebuilding itself from the ashes. In modern times, it resisted not only Western colonial designs, but also internal forces of disintegration. Whether ruled by kings or clerics, under monarchy or theocratic republic, the core identity of the Iranian people has remained unbroken. Part of what makes this identity so powerful is that it is not narrowly defined by a single ideology. It includes pride in language, poetry, philosophy, science, and a view of Iran as a bearer of high culture and independence. Figures like Cyrus the Great, Ferdowsi, Rumi, and Avicenna are not merely historical references, they are active symbols in the national imagination, used in politics, education, and even daily conversation to remind people of their long and distinguished heritage. This sense of civilizational pride generates a deep-rooted resistance to foreign domination, because such interference is perceived not merely as a challenge to sovereignty, but as an affront to Iran's dignity and ancient legacy. When Western powers attempt to pressure or isolate Iran, they are not confronting a fragile manufactured state. They are dealing with a people who view themselves as heirs to a world-shaping legacy, a civilization that predates most modern states by centuries. This identity is what gives Iran its backbone in the face of threats and sanctions. It is why defeat, military, economic, or cultural, is never total. And as long as this deep well of historical consciousness exists, Iran will always find a way to stand back up. The religious unity and doctrine within Iran form one of the most unshakable pillars of its national strength and endurance. Unlike many nations, where religion operates separately from the state or exists in fragmented sects, Iran integrates its spiritual foundation directly into its political and cultural identity. At the heart of this unity is Twelver Shia Islam, a branch of Islam that emphasizes martyrdom, resistance against injustice, and divine leadership. This doctrine is not just a belief system. It is a worldview, a moral compass, and a driving force behind Iran's social and political resilience. The 1979 Islamic Revolution transformed Iran from a secular monarchy into a theocratic republic, not by military conquest, but by a mass movement rooted in religious ideology. The revolution was inspired by a deep sense of moral responsibility drawn from Shia teachings, especially the story of Imam Hussein's stand against tyranny in the Battle of Karbala. This story is not just historical in Iran, it is living memory, repeated every year during Ashura and used as a powerful symbol of righteous resistance against oppression. When Iranians resist foreign pressure or military threats, they are not only defending their borders but also enacting a sacred narrative that defines who they are. The role of the clergy, particularly the supreme leader and the network of scholars known as the ulama, is not merely administrative. These figures are seen by many as guardians of the nation's religious mission. Their legitimacy stems from their knowledge of Islamic jurisprudence and their perceived moral integrity, not from wealth or inherited power. This creates a system where political authority is fused with spiritual guidance, lending it a kind of invulnerability that purely secular states often lack. Attempts by the West to destabilize or delegitimize Iran often fail because the leadership draws its power from a divine source in the eyes of its followers, not from political deals or economic performance alone. This religious unity also extends to the Iranian people, who, despite internal differences, are bound by shared rituals, prayers, and traditions. Even those who are not deeply religious often maintain a cultural respect for Shia values such as sacrifice, dignity, and communal solidarity. This cohesion helps the nation mobilize quickly in times of crisis. Whether facing war, sanctions, or isolations, Iranians often rally together not under a flag alone, but under a belief that they are fulfilling a moral duty ordained by faith. Furthermore, this doctrine gives Iran a unique advantage in asymmetric warfare and diplomacy. It allows for patience, long-term vision, and a willingness to endure hardship for what is seen as a divine cause. This is not fanaticism. It is strategic endurance rooted in theology. The belief that struggle or jihad can be both spiritual and physical strengthens the population's resolve in ways that material incentives cannot match. It is this fusion of religion and resistance that makes Iran not only difficult to defeat, but uniquely resilient among the nations of the world. Iran's strength lies not in the size of its army or the sophistication of its weaponry, but in its mastery of strategic patience and asymmetrical power. Unlike conventional military powers that rely on brute force and rapid domination, Iran operates with a long view of history. It calculates its moves with a patience forged by centuries of survival and shaped by a belief that time, endurance, and resilience are often more powerful than overwhelming force. This approach has consistently baffled and frustrated Western powers who are accustomed to swift victories and clear battle lines. Asymmetrical power means using tools that don't require matching an adversary's might pound for pound. Iran knows it cannot outspend or outgun the United States or NATO in a direct confrontation, but it has no need to. Instead, it relies on influence, ideology, networks, and proxy forces to extend its reach and neutralize threats. Groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen are not random militias. They are extensions of Iran's strategic depth. Through them, Iran can apply pressure, deter attacks, and shape regional dynamics without exposing itself to direct military engagement. This method is particularly effective because it creates a web of deterrence that complicates any foreign attempt at regime change or invasion. Attacking Iran could provoke responses not just from within its borders, but across the entire Middle East. These proxy relationships are not merely transactional, they are bound by ideological and religious ties, often rooted in Shia solidarity and shared resistance narratives. This makes them more loyal and effective than typical alliances formed through diplomacy or monetary support. Strategic patience is another defining feature of Iran's approach. Iranian leaders often think in terms of decades rather than election cycles or news headlines. They are willing to absorb short-term pain for long-term gain. This was seen clearly in how Iran managed its nuclear program, navigating sanctions and negotiations without abandoning its core goals. Even under intense economic pressure, Iran did not collapse or surrender. Instead, it adapted, bided its time, and waited for shifts in global politics, like changes in US administrations or cracks in European unity. Iran's cyber capabilities, intelligence operations, and information warfare also play into this asymmetrical strategy. Rather than relying solely on tanks or missiles, Iran uses disruption, targeted strikes, espionage, and influence campaigns to shape outcomes far beyond its borders. It does not need to win battles on the ground to shift the balance of power in its favor. This quiet, often invisible form of warfare makes Iran exceptionally difficult to confront using conventional Western strategies. In a world where might often equals dominance, Iran has shown that intellect, ideology, and patience can be even more formidable. By refusing to play by the rules of traditional warfare and instead writing its own, Iran has become an enduring challenge that Western powers cannot simply defeat. They must instead contend with it continually on Iran's own unpredictable terms. Iran's economy, long targeted by some of the harshest sanctions in modern history, has evolved into a model of resistance shaped by necessity. While sanctions were designed to cripple its financial systems, isolate it from global markets, and create internal unrest, they have instead forced Iran to develop a sanctions-hardened economy. This is not to say Iran's economy is without struggles. It faces inflation, unemployment, and corruption, but despite decades of pressure, it has not collapsed. In fact, in many ways, it has adapted and reoriented itself to survive without total reliance on the West. At the core of this resilience is a doctrine of self-reliance, known in Persian as kutas di mqmt, or resistance economy. The strategy promotes domestic production, local innovation, and the reduction of dependence on foreign imports, especially from adversarial countries. Iran has invested heavily in developing its own manufacturing sectors, particularly in food production, pharmaceuticals, steel, and defense. In areas where international companies once dominated, Iranian alternatives have emerged, not always as refined, but functional, national, and independent. The oil sector, while heavily sanctioned, remains a key source of revenue. Iran has built complex networks to export oil discreetly through intermediaries, informal trading systems, and regional allies. It has also diversified its economy to reduce the total dependency on oil income, a lesson learned the hard way during episodes of sanctions-induced economic shocks. This forced economic agility has given Iran an ability to pivot and adjust in ways many resource-dependent countries cannot. Iran's scientific and technological capabilities have also grown under pressure. In fields like nanotechnology, biotechnology, and missile engineering, Iran has made significant strides, much of it without Western assistance. These advances are the result of necessity. Barred from importing high-tech goods or relying on Western partners, Iran turned inward and cultivated domestic expertise. Universities, military research centers, and private firms have filled the vacuum, creating a generation of engineers and scientists focused on overcoming external limitations. The informal economy, often overlooked, plays a major role as well. A vast network of domestic traders, smugglers, and local businesses help keep goods flowing across borders, circumventing formal embargoes. This shadow economy may not be ideal for transparency, but it has been crucial to survival. It allows Iran to access markets, currency, and supplies through back channels that Western sanctions simply cannot close entirely. Additionally, Iran has shifted its trade partnerships toward the East. Countries like China, Russia, and India, while not always openly defying sanctions, have found ways to maintain commercial ties with Iran. Long-term energy deals, bartering systems, and regional economic initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative give Iran lifelines that are outside the control of Western financial systems. Rather than buckle under pressure, Iran has used sanctions as a crucible. What was intended to break the country has instead helped forge a kind of economic defiance, messy, uneven, but enduring. This sanctions-hardened economy is a vital reason why Iran remains unconquered. It has learned not just to resist, but to adapt, rebuild, and persist in the face of global isolation. Cultural resistance and pride run deep in the Iranian psyche and are essential to understanding why Iran continues to withstand external pressure, especially from Western powers. This form of resistance is not driven solely by government propaganda or political ideology. It is rooted in centuries of collective memory, identity, and an ingrained refusal to be subjugated. From the villages in the mountains to the youth in Tehran's bustling streets, there is a shared cultural code that rejects foreign domination as both dishonorable and unnatural. It is not simply about politics, it is about who Iranians believe themselves to be. Iranian pride begins with an awareness of their civilization's vast history. Persians see themselves as inheritors of one of the world's oldest and richest cultures. This is not myth-making, it is historical fact. Before the rise of Rome, Persia had established empires with advanced governance, architecture, and intellectual traditions. Names like Cyrus the Great, Darius, Ferdowsi, Avicenna, and Hafez are not just schoolbook figures, they are part of everyday consciousness. This long cultural lineage instills in Iranians a sense that they are not just a modern nation, but custodians of a legacy that must be protected against dilution or conquest. That pride becomes resistance when faced with foreign pressure. From the British and Russian interventions in the 19th century to the CIA-backed coup in 1953, to decades of sanctions and military threats, the Iranian people have developed a profound skepticism of outside powers, especially when those powers speak in the language of morality while acting in self-interest. Every time the West attempts to dictate Iran's future, it reinforces a historical wound, the memory of betrayal, manipulation, and interference. These experiences have created a national instinct to resist, to question, and to push back. Importantly, this resistance transcends political divisions. While there are many voices within Iran that challenge the government on issues of freedom, corruption, or policy, those same voices often harden against foreign criticism. Even reformists and dissidents can become nationalists in the face of external threats. There is a line where internal critique stops and cultural defense begins. That boundary is shaped not by allegiance to a regime, but by allegiance to a shared Iranian identity. This sense of dignity also influences Iran's youth, who make up a significant portion of the population. Though many are globally connected, digitally fluent, and critical of domestic restrictions, they still carry the cultural weight of national pride. They may wear jeans, listen to underground music, or challenge authority, but when their country is insulted or attacked, many respond not with apathy, but with loyalty. Cultural resistance is not blind nationalism. It is a deeply emotional, sometimes quiet, but always present resolve to preserve the essence of Iran, its independence, its voice, and its place in the world. It is this invisible armor of pride, passed from generation to generation, that shields Iran in moments of crisis. The West often misjudges this force, viewing the population through the lens of discontent alone. But beneath that discontent lies something stronger, a cultural memory that says, we are not to be ruled, we are to endure. Iran's regional influence and deep alliances are among its most potent defenses against defeat, forming a network of strategic relationships that extend its power far beyond its borders. This influence is not maintained through conventional military occupation or economic domination, but through ideological affinity, shared religious ties, and a history of supporting movements that align with its vision of resistance and sovereignty. As a result, Iran has created a sphere of influence that acts as both a shield and a sword, deterring attacks, shaping political outcomes, and counterbalancing Western and regional adversaries. At the heart of this strategy is Iran's ability to build and sustain alliances with non-state actors and regional governments who view it not as a foreign occupier, but as a patron and partner in shared struggle. In Lebanon, Hezbollah stands as the most powerful example. More than just a militia, Hezbollah is a political force with deep roots in Lebanese society, trained, armed, and ideologically aligned with Tehran. It serves as a key deterrent against Israeli aggression and Western intervention in the region. Its existence means any attack on Iran could ignite multiple fronts, a price many are unwilling to pay. In Iraq, Iran has cultivated close ties with political leaders and paramilitary groups, particularly the Popular Mobilization Forces. These connections were solidified during the fight against ISIS, where Iran provided real-time military assistance and leadership that the local population came to rely on. Today, Iran's influence in Iraq is so entrenched that it plays a central role in shaping government formation, security policy, and economic cooperation. Even among Iraqis critical of Tehran's role, many acknowledge the reality of its political weight. In Syria, Iran's alliance with the Assad regime has been crucial to the latter's survival during the civil war. Iranian military advisors, funds, and proxy militias have propped up the government, ensuring Tehran retains a direct corridor of influence from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. This land bridge, stretching from Iran through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon, is more than a geopolitical lifeline. It is a geopolitical lifeline that gives Iran strategic depth and leverage. Yemen is another front where Iran's influence is felt through its support of the Houthi movement. Though not identical in ideology to Iran's clerical establishment, the Houthis share a common enemy in Saudi Arabia and the Western-backed coalition. Iranian support, logistical, financial, and ideological, has allowed the Houthis to challenge a superior military force and maintain control over significant parts of Yemen, including its capital. These relationships are not simply transactional or opportunistic. They are rooted in Iran's broader vision of an axis of resistance, a coalition of states and groups that stand against what they see as Western imperialism and regional subjugation. This axis gives Iran enormous leverage. Any move against it could trigger consequences in multiple theaters, from the Gulf to the Levant. Ultimately, these alliances mean Iran does not stand alone. It is embedded in a web of regional interdependence that cannot be easily dismantled by sanctions or strikes. This regional depth acts as a buffer against isolation and as a force multiplier that has made defeating Iran militarily or politically a task far more complex than many in the West are willing to admit. In the end, Iran remains unconquered not because of overwhelming military power or vast wealth, but because of something far deeper and more enduring. Its resilient national identity, anchored in thousands of years of history, gives the Iranian people a profound sense of who they are. Its religious doctrine does more than guide faith. It shapes resistance and fortifies unity. Through strategic patience and asymmetrical influence, Iran has written its own rules in a world dominated by brute strength. Economically, it has adapted, endured, and grown stronger under pressure rather than folding under the weight of sanctions. Cultural pride has made surrender not just unthinkable, but dishonorable. And through its regional alliances, it has ensured that any attack on its sovereignty would set off ripples far beyond its borders. What the West often fails to grasp is that Iran cannot be subdued by force or isolation, because its strength comes not just from weapons or politics, but from the hearts and minds of its people, This is a nation that has learned not only to survive storms, but to grow through them. It is a country that carries with it the spirit of poets, prophets, warriors, and visionaries. That spirit cannot be defeated. It can only be respected or reckoned with. Thank you for taking the time to reflect on this journey of understanding and perspective. May wisdom guide your steps, and may courage fill your voice when truth needs to be spoken. Good luck, and may you walk with strength and clarity in all your paths.